My name's Shane Fontaine, and the title of my talk is The Future of Ethereum Wallets Contract-Based Accounts. First, who am I? Co-founder of Authereum. We are a login solution for Ethereum, and we use contract-based accounts on the back end to enable people to use crypto very easily. I'm also co-founder of Zero Trust, and we did a bunch of audits. We audited OpenZeppelin, Augur, Decentraland Trust Token, and a bunch of others. And also, I'm a co-founder of the gas siphon attack. It was an issue a lot of exchanges had with Ethereum where someone could effectively steal a bunch of crypto from exchanges and they would never know. And we ended up telling all the exchanges and working with them to fix that. So the talk of the title is contract-based accounts. But to understand those, first we need to understand what we have now. So what we have now are called externally owned accounts. If you have an Ethereum account, it's probably an externally owned account or an EOA. And that means that you have a public key and a private key, and your money is all your value and all your tokens are stored on one key, and that key has access to all your funds. And that's what we have now. But in the future, we're going to have these things called contract-based accounts. And what that means is all your money is no longer on one key, but rather it's in a smart contract, something like a wallet. And what you can do with that is you can assign many keys to your wallet, and you can have effectively a number of different ways to access your funds as opposed to just having one key. And there's a lot of things you can do with that, and this is what we'll talk about now. And so the pros of a contract-based account versus just a normal EOA. And there's many, and this is just a few, but it's programmable. You can do things like batch transactions, meta transactions. You can have Web 2.0 style security. You can recover your account much easier, and there's also transportability. And I'll talk on a few of these today. And cons. A lot of people ask what's the bad thing about contract-based accounts, and there's not really much. They do cost more than a EOA. But that's not always true either, so we'll get into why that's the case. So there's four big topics of this talk, and this will be the most text you'll see on a slide, so don't worry about it. But we'll go over batch transactions, which means users can send multiple transactions in one transaction on chain. We'll go over meta transactions, meaning it's a new way of transacting on Ethereum, and it allows for a number of advantages. We'll talk about the new security features you can have with contract-based accounts and the recoverability that comes naturally with contract-based accounts as well. So the first one's batch transactions. Instead of explaining it to you, I'll kind of show you what a batch transaction is. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this Etherscan type of page, but what you might not have seen is all those token transfers. And so you can see there, if you understand what you're looking at, there's 8 different transactions going on in this one single on-chain transaction. And what this is doing is it's one person making one transaction on-chain, but really interacting with 8 different tokens and transferring many different things. This is because with a contract-based account, you can really batch all these transactions together and send them at once. And the advantage of this is you don't need to send 8 different transactions. And I'm sure most of you have sent a transaction on the main chain, and it's click a button, click another button, wait 15 seconds, do it again. And if you had to do that 8 times, it's really redundant. And with contract-based accounts, you can do it one time, and it fixes everything. And so here's the definition of it. This is going over what I just said. But there's another cool feature of these things is that it will allow dApp developers to also design their app in such a way that they can batch transactions. So you no longer have to see things like approve and transfer. You don't need to force your users to understand why they're clicking so many buttons at once. You can do it all in one go. And so this is a pretty obvious example. I'm sure many of you have seen Uniswap. But when you go to trade a token on Uniswap, the first thing you have to do is approve the token. And you guys know what that means. But you have to approve a token, wait for the transaction, and then you can actually swap, which defeats the whole purpose of Uniswap being simple and easy. And so what can happen with batch transactions is you can actually approve and transfer in one transaction. And so that unlock little icon over there, that you should never have to see that in the future if contract-based accounts become a really big thing. And then there's even worse or even more dApps that have even more interactions, and a lot of times the users just feel like this, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're clicking buttons, and that's really the experience we have now, and it will change, and it will change pretty quickly. And why are batch transactions important? The time I mentioned, if you are sending 8 individual transactions, that's going to be at least 2, 3, if not 5 or 6 minutes, and you can do that in one 15-second transaction. And then money. And so earlier I said that one of the cons of contract-based accounts is the cost. And that's because when you send a contract-based account transaction, there's a little bit of overhead more so than an EOA that EOAs don't have. But if you do something like batching transactions, it actually reduces the cost. So if you want to send 8 EOA transactions, that's going to cost more than batching 8 transactions in one contract transaction. So it really does help the whole ecosystem by batching transactions like this. It lightens the load of the network, and there's really not many downsides to doing this. Another thing is meta transactions. So meta transactions are the idea of taking a transaction, signing it, and sending it to someone, and then having that person send it to the network. So as it works now, if you make a transaction, you sign it, and you send it to the network. But meta transactions are this concept of signing something, sending it to someone else, usually called a relayer, and then relayer sending it to the network. And we'll go over why this is cool. And here's a nice actual graphic on it. And so you can imagine you're the guy, the number one, and what you're doing with the meta transactions, you're just signing the transaction, you're sending it to a relayer, which is it's basically a server. The server takes it, they sign it in the same way that, because a signed transaction is what goes to the network, the relayer sends it to the network, and then what gets sent back to you is the transaction hash. So to you, the user, it looks the exact same, but what's going on in the background creates a ton of efficiencies that don't exist with EOAs. And so there's a lot of things you can do with this. And so the idea being, with most meta transactions, the relayer pays the fee. But if you're using a meta transaction, the relayer will pay the fee, and then usually you, the user, pay the relayer back. And so that's how the economics work behind it. And so really it's economically the same as you sending a transaction, but instead of you paying the network, you're paying the relayer who's paying the network. But with meta transactions, you can do cool things. So one thing you can do is something we do at Authereum, is we allow fees to be paid in DAI. And so I'm sure a lot of you have experienced trying to send a token and realizing you need ETH in your account and to pay the gas fee, and then so you have to go find ETH, and it's a big headache. But what you can do with meta transactions, if you're using a relayer that accepts tokens as gas fees, you can actually only ever have DAI in your account, and you can only ever interact with DAI and never even have to hold ETH to make Ethereum transactions, which is unheard of right now, and it will be a thing in the future. And so you can see here, something we've done at Authereum is make a DAI first experience. And so what that means is when you make an account, you get, you're prompted to buy DAI, you use DAI, you send DAI. Some users will never ever touch Ethereum, yet they'll interact with the network in the same way they would a normal account. And then I see it's a little small, but this is another Etherscan link, and you can see here there's 2 token transfers, and so this is me sending someone a token. And so you'll see at the top there's 5 DAI being sent to someone, and then right under that there's a smaller amount of DAI being sent. That DAI being sent is the fee I'm paying the relayer who actually paid the transaction. And so from me, the account owner, I never touched ETH, and I was able to make this transaction. And so that's something we haven't seen yet, and we're going to see a lot more of in the future. And this is another page, but what this is showing is something even more advanced. Again, 2 transactions, 1 DAI, me sending DAI to someone, but the second transaction is a 0 DAI transfer. And so what that means is the relayer sent the transaction for free, so I, the user, didn't actually even pay a transaction fee. So this is something that's only possible with meta transactions. With Authereum, all the transactions are free, so if you use Authereum now, you get all free transactions, and it makes you onboarding just incredibly easy. Another feature of contract-based accounts is Web2 security. And so there's a lot of advantages of having firewalls and Web 2.0 style security that we don't see in crypto. And with with contract-based accounts, you can actually do this. And so there's a list of a few things we can do, and we'll go over a few of them. I don't know if many of you remember the EtherDelta hack. There was an issue a long time ago where someone changed the front end of EtherDelta, and effectively anyone who went on EtherDelta had their money stolen. And so there's article after article after article written about this, and there was nothing anyone could do. A bunch of people lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was a nightmare for the ecosystem. But with contract-based accounts and Web 2.0 style security, you can do something like this, something like MetaMask does, where if we do detect that there is an issue, that someone's being hacked, that there's a bad website, you can actually block the website. And by block, I mean show a warning like this. You can say, hey, user, you looks like you might be interacting with a malicious website. You might want to take a look at this. And that's one of the potentially the biggest things we can do with contract-based accounts. Now, contract-based accounts should be censorship resistant, so users they might see this screen, but with Authereum and with most other contract-based accounts, they can get around it. If they think they are safe, they can get around it. There's nothing Authereum can do to stop users from sending transactions, and so what we do is provide a convenience layer and try to show people, hey, this may or may not be a bad application. Web 2.0 style security, we can do biometric security. And so say you want to send a transaction, but you want to have some sort of 2FA on it, you can do that with your thumbprint or just simple Face ID. And that's going to be a game changer because we don't see biometrics in crypto so much right now. And then there's something cool we've talked about, but we haven't yet implemented, is a per contract function whitelist. And so this is a little more abstract, but you can imagine interacting with something like Uniswap. Most interactions on Uniswap only call one function. And so you'd imagine there's a Uniswap contract and there's one function that most people ever call. What we can do with contract-based accounts and Web 2.0 style security is say, hey, if the user is not actually calling that function, don't let it go through. And this might be the case where someone malicious took over Uniswap and is trying to send malicious transactions elsewhere. But what Authereum users and a lot of contract-based accounts can do is actually say, hey, your transaction's not going where you think it's going. Let's stop you or warn you and say, are you sure you want to do this? And so it really gets down to the contract level where you can start implementing security layers that we don't see today. And then one more feature that is really the biggest game changer of contract-based accounts is recoverability. So like I said earlier on, the way we have it now, externally owned accounts are one key, all your values on that key. If you lose that key, you lose your money. And that's not cool. A lot of people aren't going to be able to do that, especially crypto people or non-crypto people. But what you can do with contract-based accounts is you can imagine your contract-based account is a wallet on the network, and you can access it with a number of different keys. And so it's a multi-sig in some sense, but there's a lot of cool things you can do to actually recover it. So one thing you can do is set up many keys to access your funds. And so you can hook up your MetaMask account, you can hook up a ledger, you can have a seed phrase. All of these can be ways to access your funds. But as you know right now, if you have a MetaMask account, you only have a MetaMask key. If you have a ledger, you can only access your ledger. Your seed phrase is the same way. But what you can do with this is you can have 3 different types of keys, all accessing all your funds. You can just split them up and do whatever you want with them. And it's a really big paradigm shift that we haven't really seen much of today. But it's going to make usability so much easier on Ethereum. There's also this concept of social recovery a lot of people have been talking about. And the idea here is you can set trusted parties, set trusted people in your life that, hey, if you lost your key, these people can all come together and recover your money for you. And so it's a little newer way of thinking, like trusting your friends with your money. No one of your friends can actually have access to your money at any given time, but together they can. And so what you can do with social recovery is really put the recoverability on people instead of on technology. And that's something that's really interesting and a new way of thinking. There's a EIP out there. One of the Authereum co-founders, Miguel, is one of the co-authors of it. But we're really trying to push this forward and get this into the hands of people because we think it's going to be one of the best usability, increased improvements in all of crypto, really. And then what's the future? What is the future of Ethereum and wallets, and what does that look like, even past what I just talked about? It's really a way to have a programmable wallet. And so Ethereum is programmable money, and we've heard this a lot. Smart contracts allow us to put limits on value transfer, but having these contract-based accounts really makes your wallet programmable. You can do things like set daily limits. You can only allow dApps to spend up to 1 ETH. You can only spend 1 ETH per day on a dApp, or whatever you really imagine, you can program into your wallet. And this is one of the first times where a programmable wallet is available. And then there's some other things you can do that I didn't even mention. And so I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Tornado Cash. We can integrate privacy into these things. As you know, a lot of transactions on, not a lot, all of transactions on Ethereum are public. And if you integrate Tornado Cash or some privacy layer into Authereum or contract-based accounts, you can completely remove the public nature of some of these transactions. Right now, I said earlier that the transactions in contract-based accounts are relatively expensive, and over time, I think they're only going to get cheaper. We can drill down to the bits and get really, really efficient transactions that'll make them really ubiquitous in the space. They can be ported over to consortium chains and maybe even other chains as well. Right now they're really prevalent on Ethereum, but it doesn't have to be just that. And you can have more granular controls. I said that you can set daily limits per contract. I said you can only call certain functions on Uniswap in different contracts, and you can really, whatever you think of, you can do. And then anything. There's really anything that's possible with these things as long as you can program it and as long as Ethereum and the EVM supports it. How can you use one today? You can make an Authereum account. That's our company, and we think we did a pretty good job of this. We made it super simple. Like I said, we pay for the deployments and also transaction fees. So if you're using an Authereum account today, you're not paying a single transaction fee. And we launched a few days ago, and we've got tremendous feedback and said that's one of the best onboarding user experience things they've ever seen. And then everyone likes free money. So if you want free money, we currently have a pinned tweet on our Authereum site. If you retweet this with your Authereum name, which is something.auth.eth, you get one of those when you make an Authereum account. If you retweet this and put your name, we'll send you 10 DAI to enhance the user experience even further. And so I'll leave this up on the screen for a second, but we really want people to be able to use and experience Ethereum in a very easy and simple way. And we think we're in a good spot to be able to help people to do this. And that's pretty much it. That's all my contact information. There's a few of us from Authereum here. We're all wearing this kind of shirt, and we have shirts and stuff to give out. And thank you for coming to this talk.